Laura, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Noel. It's great to be here.
This is going to be an interesting broadcast. I can already tell. I mean, the title of your book, First Kill All the Marriage Counselors. I got to ask the question. I mean, I have to think that this comes out of your own personal story.
It really does. That was a big part of it. When I was newly married, I was super happy because my husband seemed amazing and smart and handsome
It
and
always
funny.
starts that way, right?
It starts that way. But just a few years in, things weren't going very well. So I decided I would bring him to marriage counseling, and then the counselor could fix him, and then I would finally be happy. So first, that didn't work, as you already know, because that's not how it works. But something about complaining about each other for an hour a week really made me think that it was pretty hopeless. In fact, that's when I came the closest to filing for divorce from my husband, which would have been tragic because that was 17 years ago, and he's the man of my dreams. So it would have been really sad if I'd thrown it all away because of this disparaging experience of marriage counseling. But it turns out it wasn't just me. When I started my mission that I'm on now, my just trying to save my own marriage gave me this amazing platform to help all these other women. I've helped many thousands of women revitalize the intimacy in their relationships. And they all told me the same thing. They were like, well, we're going to marriage counseling and now we're separated, or now there's an affair, and then I actually read about a study at UCLA that showed that 75% of couples who get traditional behavioral marriage counseling end up separated within 1 year. So it wasn't just me. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work, and we're being lied to about it.
So is it true that you really think that all marriage counselors are not helpful to
Oh,
marriages?
no, it gives me no pleasure to say so because I think their intentions are good. They think they got in the business to help people. And unfortunately, it's based on some old technology, right? From like Jung and Freud back from the previous millennium and centuries. And unfortunately, they just don't seem to have been trained in the modern day skills that and the secrets that really make a marriage intimate and passionate and peaceful again when there's problems.
Yeah, because I think I'm going to push back a little bit. I don't want to linger too long on this, but I know a number of counselors. We've had some on the show that are phenomenal at saving marriages. I mean, they would credit themselves, similar to your stat of saving thousands of marriages. They would credit themselves and have just as many stories to tell about it as well. Is it more that what we're talking about is finding the right counselor who, one, values marriage, is working towards saving marriages, and two, they themselves have those same core values?
Well, I think for me, one of the things that I learned that was interesting was that just as you wouldn't want to go to a personal trainer who's got a spare tire and maybe is on the verge of having bypass surgery, or like a financial planner who's on the verge of bankruptcy and has a ton of credit card debt, when it comes to relationships, I want somebody who has what I want. And there's nothing about a little certificate on the wall that says that. And most of that information is confidential, right? You can't really go to your marriage counselor and say, well, how is your marriage really, right? So one of the things for me that we're so proud of about what we do at Laura Doyle Connect is that every relationship coach here has the transformation. She's got a very deeply personal story to tell about how her marriage was in a ditch or had lost its sizzle, and the things that she did to transform it. And one of the things that was really fascinating to me, that was totally counter to everything I learned growing up, was that we women are the keepers of the relationship. So a lot of times we're looking for a counselor to fix him. And oh my gosh, we're the ones holding the keys the whole time. And it's been really empowering for me and, for a lot of the women I work with, to learn about those feminine gifts and be able to use those in a way to really make their marriages magical again.
Yeah, you talk about that in the book about how women hold the keys to helping improve their marriage. Seems a little unfair. I mean, what is the responsibility of the husband in this role?
Well, it turns out that I've asked thousands of men this question. Actually, Noel, I should ask you. Are you
Yeah,
married?
I am married, 12
Okay.
years, three
Well,
kids. I'll be your
congratulations.
guinea pig for the day.
Okay. So, Noel, how important is it to you that your wife is happy?
Oh, it's hugely important.
Okay. Well, I've asked thousands of men that question, and they all say the same thing. They say it's everything. It's the most important thing. It's imperative. It's hugely important.
Yeah.
And that is the role. So it's interesting. All men have what I call the hero gene, where they just want to come in on that white horse and rescue us and make our day and make us smile or laugh and delight us and ease our burden. So, and we women have some special gifts in terms of being able to make men feel successful, make our husbands feel successful, that they are being our hero and they are making us successful. So the things that we come to the table wanting in a relationship are a little different from the other person. In fact, one of the things that was really surprising to me that I didn't understand at all in my early marriage was that respect was so important to my husband. Mm-hmm. Would you say that's pretty important to you too, Noel?
Absolutely.
So it's like oxygen for him. And I did not realize that I was being disrespectful, because what I was doing was I was giving him helpful information on how to make a resume, right? You're laughing. It's like helpful in wife language equals critical in husband language. And I had no idea why he was so defensive all the time. I'm just trying to be helpful.
Yeah.
But it was actually incredibly disrespectful. And it wasn't until I recognized that and took a different approach that I just remember after I started using, I discovered these, I call them the 6 intimacy skills.
Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, I just remember I was on the verge of divorce, as I said. And so I decided as a last-ditch effort, I was going to ask women who'd been married for what seemed like an eternity, which was 15 years, what their secrets were. How did you stay married and how did you make it happy? And so they said these things I didn't even understand. And one of them said, "Oh, I try never to tell my husband that he's done something wrong or criticize him. I try never to criticize him, no matter how much it seems like he deserves it." I was like, "Oh, have you got anything else?" I don't know how to do it. But I was so desperate. I was really embarrassed about the idea of getting divorced. I didn't want to lose the status and with my friends and family. So I decided to start experimenting with all of their suggestions. It took me years. I made my own marriage like this little laboratory, and I was just doing trial and error. And I remember one day I walked through the door and his face lit up again. Like he was happy to see me. Mm-hmm. And that had been gone for a long time. And so I thought, wow, this is working. And I knew that I was onto something. When I stuck to these 6 intimacy skills, things at my house got playful. The passion was back. We were holding hands again. And if I didn't stick to them, then, things didn't go so well. We're back to like wall-to-wall hostility and Cold Wars, which were really painful to live with.
So would you say that these 6 intimacy skills can be applied to any marriage, no matter what journey they're on? I'm just thinking of the journey of some couples who have gone through infidelity, or abuse. I mean, let's throw that one out on the table. Abuse. Well, I mean, can these 6 intimacy skills be utilized in any type of marriage?
Well, there is such a thing as a divorce I endorse, which is, and there's only 3 of them. It's the rare exception. It's if you're being physically abused, then you're not safe, and safety comes first. Mm-hmm. If your husband is not capable of being faithful to you, then you're not safe. Safety comes first. Yeah. Or if he's actively addicted to drugs, alcohol, or gambling, he's always going to serve that addiction ahead of his desire to make you happy. So, so those are safety issues. But the good news is, if your husband doesn't fall into one of those 3 categories, then you have a good guy, and not a perfect man, right, but one that you can have a wonderful relationship with if you learn the skills, right? It's kind of funny to me that there was no relationships 101 at my school. I don't know if there was at your school, right? But my parents are divorced, so I was following a failed recipe, and I'm just not sure where I was supposed to learn it. I think about like a 16-year-old, we don't just throw them the car keys and go, "Hey, you're 16, go have a spin with the car," right? Mm-hmm. We make them take driver's lessons, and then they take a test, and they have to get a license. And, I think it's interesting to me that with relationships, there just really is no training. Yeah. And we're just expected to know, okay, go on a relationship. And then, of course, when you crash the car, you think, whoa, this is really dangerous. And people get scared that it's not going to be safe. But once I got my driver's license, I stopped crashing the car, which I did that once before I got my driver's license. So, sadly, but I was
So I want to uncover a couple of the 6 intimacy skills
Sure.
on this broadcast. But the first one is replenish your spirit with the self-care. And I think you touch on it in the book about how the difference between a pure desire and a demand. Can you help our listeners understand that?
Sure. So, well, I'll tell you the truly embarrassing, tragic story of my first romantic getaway, which is my husband John. Actually, before we were married, he took me to Hawaii, and
Sounds like a good guy.
I know, right? I know. Wow. Anyway, he on the first day, I thought, oh, this is gonna be great. We're gonna go to the beach. I can't wait to go to the beach. But instead of saying I want to go to the beach, I got up and said, hey, what do you want to do today? And he goes, well, I think it'd be fun to go see a volcano. And I was like, oh, a volcano, huh? Okay. But like we were kind of new boyfriend and girlfriend. I didn't want to upset the apple cart. I just wanted to be close. So I thought, I'm just not even going to say what I want. I'm just going to go along with the volcano plan. And so we get in the rental car and we're driving around, and you can't really see a volcano. All you can see are the molten rocks on the side of the road for a long time. It's kind of a hot day. And I start fuming. I start thinking like, gosh, he didn't even ask me what I wanted to do. And he could tell something's wrong. He's like, is everything okay? What's wrong? And I go, did you think this would be fun? Because I don't think it's very fun. I think it's stupid. It's really boring. Why wanted to go to the beach? You didn't even ask me what I wanted to do. So I think I was even more shrill than that, sadly. And so poor guy, like all he knew is I took my girlfriend to Hawaii. Like, where did I go wrong? And I feel sad for that earlier version of myself who had no idea how to advocate for her desires. And if you can't say what you want, you're never going to get what you want. So of course, sideways. And so one of the part of the training that we do here at Laura Doyle Connect on the 6 intimacy skills, and there's a skill called relinquishing inappropriate control. And part of that is learning to express your desires in a way that inspires. It's super simple. You just say, I would love, and then a final outcome. So you're not saying, hey, there's a dress I saw in the window of the store, and you should go there and bring the coupon and buy me the dress, right? That would be like a control, a demand, expectation. But if you just said, hey, I would love a new dress, like that's it. That's all your husband needs. He needs to know the instructions to make you happy. He needs to know what you're desiring. He's not going to be able to read your mind, but he doesn't need you to tell him how. And just like Mick Jagger said, you can't always get what you want. So you just want to watch that there's not like a consequence for him. Like, oh, well, I told you I want a new dress and you didn't get me one, right? Like there's not going to be that resentment on the other side. Then it wasn't what I call a pure desire. It was a little mixed in with maybe manipulation and expectation, which are not as attractive. But the great news is when you learn to express your desires in a way that inspires, your husband will just knock himself out. He'll do whatever it takes to make you happy when he knows how.
Okay. So, does this tie into skill number 6, which is refocus your view with gratitude?
Well, my favorite thing about refocusing your view with gratitude is what I call the spouse fulfilling prophecy.
Okay.
So a lot of times when women arrive here, they have what I call a negative spouse fulfilling prophecy. They're like, yeah, my husband doesn't care about my happiness, or my husband has a terrible temper, or my husband doesn't want to spend any time with me. But you think about it, they're like they're showing up to the relationship with that mantra and they're repeating it to him. It's not going to be very attractive. So I'll give you an example. I had one client where hers was, he never wants to spend time with me. And so we worked on the idea that she would just change up that affirmation and start saying, I know you want to spend time with me. So it was Saturday morning and she was thinking they were going to spend the day together. And then her husband's friend calls and says, hey, do you want to go surfing? He's like, yeah, let's go surfing. So he's like, I'm going to go surfing. And she gets really upset and says, I can't believe it. We were going to spend the day together. You never want to spend any time with me, which was her old spouse fulfilling prophecy. And she walked out of she stormed out of the room. And then she remembered a few minutes later, like, oh yeah, I was going to use my new affirmation. So she went back in and she said, I'm sorry I got so upset. I know you want to spend time with me. I'm sure you'll figure it out. And then she left the room again. And he came back like 5 minutes later and said, hey, I just called my friend and told him I can't make it so we could spend the day together. And they went antiquing, and he hates antiquing. So it works really fast. There's just story after story. I did the same thing in my relationship. Unfortunately, one of the things I was unwittingly doing was affirming to my husband that he didn't make enough money. So you can imagine, like, you don't make enough money. You don't make enough money. It was like, why don't you ask for a raise? Why don't you get a better job? Why don't you
Mm-hmm.
do your resume? And we got to the point where he was making no money and I was supporting us both. And around this time, I discovered the intimacy skills and the power of the spouse fulfilling prophecy. So I decided I would start affirming to him, well, you've always been a good provider. And that felt true. And it felt like a little bit of a stretch, but I was like, I'm willing to do this. And then I also decided, just for fun, I was going to start calling him Mr. Moneybags. And so I did that. And around that time, my husband started his own business. He's had it for over a decade. He does really well, better than he ever did, working for other people previously.
Yeah.
And so you just really see how much influence you have as a wife over the self-respect that your husband shows up in the world with.
Right. Well, and for our listeners, let me just read through the skills, the 6 skills, because they might be kind of going, wait, you're at 1, now you're at 6. So,
Yeah.
so the skills are replenish your spirit with self-care. That's the first one. Skill 2 is restore respect. Skill 3 is relinquish control of your man. Skill 4 is receive, gift, compliments, and help. And skill 5 is reveal your heart with vulnerability. And skill 6 is refocus your view with gratitude. And as I read through those, it really becomes apparent that a lot of this is focused on that initial thing that you brought up, which was respect.
Yes.
And you talk about in skill 2, restoring respect. I think this is a difficult one for a lot of women. I mean, especially if you don't have the husband who, is the champion of your marriage and is invested in your dreams and your, ambitions in life. And they're more the feeling like, man, I married him because he had all these wonderful things, but now we're 3 years in and it just seems like, if anything, I should hold back on giving him praise and admiration for who he is. Can you help define for our listeners what does respect look like when it comes to the relationship?
Well, sure. And it is interesting, Noel. You bring up a great point. I mean, a lot of times we're giving more respect to the stranger we just met in the waiting room than we are to our own husbands. It's
Right.
like expression, familiarity breeds contempt, and there's some truth to that. When you see your husband's shortcomings or smell his bad breath or whatever it is, you can make a decision like, oh, he's going to screw this up, right? You see him make a mistake and you remember that and think he might do it again. So my definition of respect is expecting the best outcome, not the worst, from your husband. And so you're modeling that to him by, I call it choosing your faith instead of your fear. And a lot of times the urge to control, this was a big aha moment that like, oh, changed my life. Control is always based in fear. So anytime I'm trying to I'm going to remind him to pay the bill, it's because I'm afraid he's not going to pay it.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I want to remind him, if I say, are you going to wear that to the party? Right? It's because I'm afraid I'm going to be embarrassed that people think I didn't dress my husband well or something along those lines. And sometimes it's a realistic fear and sometimes it's not so realistic. But in that moment, if I'm going to indulge my fear, then I'm going to give up the intimacy in our relationship, because fear and intimacy are opposites. Like like light and dark, right? If you want to be in control, you're going to give up the intimacy. And if you want to be intimate, you're going to have to give up the control. So when I think about choosing respect, sometimes I'm going to be in a fake it till you make it kind of role. Not so much anymore, but certainly when I first started out. But it was really helpful for me to just remind myself, like, I married him because I thought he was really smart and talented and amazing and funny and handsome. So what's changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing I do have control of. Just like we talk about, you hear a lot about how the attitude of gratitude is focusing on the things that you want more of, because whatever you focus on increases. So if I'm really focused on being grateful for all the strengths that my husband brings to the relationship, then I'm going to see those things increase instead of focusing on, and as there's an expression, some people find fault like it was buried treasure. So if I'm finding fault from my husband, that's what I'm going to experience more of.
Yeah. So I love how you juxtapose the control and intimacy, because I think that's so true. But I would also say that's pretty common in a lot of relationships where you see women subtly controlling their husbands. What are some of those ways that women, maybe inadvertently or with all true intention, they're subtly just controlling their husband?
Well, it's funny. I have a blog called "The Top 10 Ways to Control Your Husband," and the subtitle is "And None of These Work." Right. So no matter how you do it, like husbands are brilliant about figuring out when we're trying to control them, and all it does is really kind of kick up their need to have sovereignty over their own decisions. So it'll be funny, like, I could get up in the morning and say, okay, are you going to clean the garage today? You said you were going to clean the garage. Okay, that's pure control. And, my husband has shared with me now, he's like, yeah, when you say stuff like that, I would just be like, okay, I am not cleaning the garage today for the whole rest of the day. Like, even if he was thinking he was going to clean the garage,
Right.
he now has to like dig in his heels. And we have this huge battle over something so simple, such a waste, right? So that's one. Another one for me, when I first realized I was being controlling, I thought, okay, I'm not going to say things that are controlling. I'll just ask him questions. And the questions were no better. I thought they were better. They were no better. Like I'd say like, oh, are you going to take the freeway at this hour? Right. And obviously the implication is like, we're going to get stuck in traffic.
Yeah.
So, so asking questions is one. Certainly criticizing is definitely a way of trying to control him. For me, I was just super, I'm not proud to say, Noel, but I was just really blatant about it. Like, oh, you should rearrange your resume, or you should proofread your resume, or there was like a million things I used to. Oh, that's not a very healthy lunch. How can you eat a candy bar for lunch? That's not healthy. Here, you need more vegetables, right? Telling them how to eat. I used to tell them how to be more romantic, more ambitious at work. So it was kind of. It was really an eye-opener for me that when I first stopped being controlling, I felt so tongue-tied, like I had nothing to say. And it really kind of shows you how much of the time I was spending controlling my husband. And I was just really busy being the armchair quarterback of his life. And what's interesting about that, Noel, is that when I was doing that, it was a lot scarier than showing up for my own life. So I think that was part of my motivation, because the minute I stopped controlling him, what showed up for me is I was called to write a book. It became a New York Times bestseller. It's published in 17 languages in 28 countries. I got to go on national TV and international TV and help over 15,000 women revitalize their relationships. So speaking live in front of hundreds of people, that was terrifying. And when I think about it now, it's like, oh, I was just too afraid to show up for my life. So it seemed easier to focus on his life. But every second I was controlling him, another minute of my life was going by with like no one at the wheel, right? I was just like riding in the back seat of the car of my life. And, it really is kind of tragic when I think about all the things that I missed while I was ruining my relationship.
So I just want to make sure that we're clear on this. You're saying that to relinquish the control for women, oftentimes that means not saying anything and then setting the course on a new destination, vision, dream that they have?
Well, I know for me, getting the key to getting myself to stop controlling was to first focus. I call it on my own paper, right? It was like all my decisions and choices and preferences are on my paper, and all of his decisions and choices and paper, preferences are on his paper. And when I was always on his paper, I was neglecting my own. So the first step was definitely, the other thing that had happened, Noel, is I'd really made myself quite the martyr. I had to do everything around our house so that it would get done the right way, which is my way, right? Mm-hmm. So it was really exhausting, and I never got a break. And so step one was actually, and I had to come up with a really structured way to do it. And I call it, you do 3 things a day for your own delight. So that's what I started doing. It was just like really scheduling in, like the way you do like a hair appointment or something. It's like, hey, I'm going to meet a friend for coffee. I'm going to take a walk or a nap or a bath, or I love to play volleyball. I love to rollerblade. So I had to really work those things into the schedule. And yeah, that was absolutely the key to both relinquishing the control of my husband and starting to make myself happy, which I know it's going to sound like a big duh when I say it this way, but it wasn't obvious to me. That's what you have to do to have a happy relationship. Right. You have to first make yourself happy.
Yeah, that's so huge. What are some of the most important ways for women to be vulnerable with their husband?
Well, I know for me, that was kind of like the last thing I wanted to do, was be vulnerable. Even though he's my husband, and on some level I know he loves me, even to this day, like I was sitting on the couch watching, he was gone. I didn't know he was coming back. I was watching The King's Speech, and that movie always makes me cry. So I'm on the couch blubbering by myself. And then he walks in and he says, "Oh, hi, cutie," or something like that. And I'm like trying to suck it all up. So he won't know that I've been crying, and it's totally not working. I'm not saying anything. He's like, "What, what's the matter?" And then he sees that I'm crying. And, he loves that tender part of me. So it's kind of hilarious. I'm always like trying to like keep it under wraps. It's like, no, I like that part. So that's just one example. But we have a couple of cheat phrases that I teach women to use because it really is, it's scary to be vulnerable. There's a reason we're trying to keep ourselves defended. It's like we feel like we're less likely to be hurt. But so one of the phrases that I suggest women can use is, for instance, "I miss you." So I used to say to my husband, like, it's like, "I don't see you making an effort to spend time with me," or, "we need to put like a date night on the calendar or something." And that was completely unvulnerable and really unattractive too. Mm-hmm. But as soon as I say, "I miss you," that's like vulnerability wrapped up in a compliment. It's really attractive. And, my husband is like, gone way out of his way to fly home a day early. Like I'll say, "I miss you," and he's like all the way across the country, and then he gets on a plane and he's like making, all kinds of connections and crazy stuff so he can see me just because I miss him. So it's pretty cool to see how powerful it can be to bring your vulnerability to the relationship.
Yeah. And I mean, and at what level is vulnerability a lot of self work as an individual, right? I mean, to be able to open up your heart and share in that way.
Well, what was great for me is I'm a super practical person. So all the intimacy skills, and I really did struggle too, Noel. Like I had read a lot of books and I was really trying to save my marriage. I struggled with a lot of information that I didn't know how to apply. Like people would say, "Oh, you have to love yourself first." And I was like, wow, I didn't really know how to do that. I'm like, should I hug myself, or what do I do to implement these suggestions? So for me, the vulnerability, like I mentioned, I have these, I call them cheat phrases actually, to help me default to being the woman that I really want to be most in my marriage. So "I miss you" is one example. I have another one. It's "ouch." And that is, all husbands are going to hurt your feelings from time to time, right? I have the best husband in the world. I just adore him. And he's super sweet and tender. And once, when you live so close together, it's like kids playing together, right? They get bruised or scratched or whatever. They don't mean to. It's just what happens. So in that moment, I've got a choice, right? I can either kind of like smack him back verbally, or say something equally hurtful to him, right? I know how to do that. Or I could just choose this one powerful word, which is "ouch." Mm-hmm. And it's just, I know from experience, it's so convicting for my husband because the last thing he wants to do is hurt my feelings. And when I say that, it really, all he hears is his own voice in his head, his own conscience. And, my experience is like often quickly get an apology to that. And it really saves me. Like now I haven't said something I need to apologize for. I've kept my dignity. I've showed up in this vulnerable way. So for me, it was not about inner work or reflecting on my past or my childhood or anything. It really was just about skills. Yeah. I need to know how to shift into reverse.
Right.
Car analogy we were using before. And now that I can do that, so it hasn't been a ton of inner work, although I definitely, through using the skills over time, it definitely has been like the best self-improvement program I've ever undertaken. I feel grateful every day that, I feel so much more dignified and soft. I feel like I really am so much more feminine. I feel like I used to be pretty hairy in the old days, unfortunately, really kind of taking a masculine approach. Like I was at work, I was using the same things that made me successful at work in my relationship.
And it wasn't working.
It wasn't working. Yeah.
Well, and I think you think about the response so often when we've been hurt is you get defensive or you get critical, you stonewall. I mean, there's all those kind of responses, but saying "ouch" diffuses kind of the time bomb that's about to go off in a relationship. I think that's a great skill set and very practical, right? You don't have to go through hours of counseling and therapy to get to the place of saying "ouch."
Oh, we have to talk about like, when I'm in my childhood, did right? Like you don't
Right.
have to go back and figure out how you got in the ditch. Yeah, it's just super easy skills. And so I'm just kind of just touching on the very basics of the skills training that we
Sure,
do. But
sure.
yeah, just if you just start using those two phrases like I miss you and ouch, wow, you would just get so far,
Right.
really creating a lot more intimacy in your relationship. Vulnerability is an indispensable ingredient for intimacy. And we as women, we have I call it emotional brilliance, right? This is one of our gifts that we bring to the relationship. And that is absolutely essential for the fascination that creates long-term commitment. So we have to bring that emotional brilliance and vulnerability in order to have that intimacy. And I just think it's such great news because we have that power to do that. And it's sort of like with Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility. So I feel like we have this responsibility to learn how to do that.
Yeah. The last question I had was just, it really, I think, is focused on skill 6, which we touched on, but I don't know if, I think you took it more towards the self-fulfilling prophecy. Refocusing your view on gratitude and how essential that is in any marriage. What are some practical ways for a wife listening that, can begin to apply this to their relationship?
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, years ago, I was teaching a workshop and we were on this very topic of the skill of gratitude. And the homework assignment was to go home and give your husband 3 gratitudes a day, every day for the next week. And so I remember Isabella raised her hand. She's like, yeah, excuse me. I don't see why I should do that because, first of all, I do everything and nobody's thanking me. So this one just doesn't really make sense to me. It doesn't seem fair. And so we talked a little bit. She agreed she was going to just try this as an experiment in her relationship anyway. So she went home and she started thanking her husband. She thanked him for just ordinary things like taking out the trash and working hard to support the family, even though she had a job too. And then he watched the baby while she went out to her exercise class. So she thanked him for that too. And then by the second night, they were sitting down to dinner, and he turned to her and said, Isabella, you've really taught me that we need to appreciate each other more. So I wanted to thank you for making dinner tonight. And she nearly fell out of her chair, right? Because this was not the culture in their home, but we really have so much power to create a culture of gratitude in our relationship. And that's something I was afraid to do in the beginning. I thought if I thank my husband for taking out the trash, he's going to think it's optional and stop doing it. It's just going to be more work for me. But nothing could be further from the truth. It's totally the opposite. If I thank my husband for taking out the trash, he's like looking around for something else he can do so that I can appreciate him for that too.
Yeah.
So we have quite a culture where we're just constantly thanking each other now. Like, yesterday he was putting up lights and, the Christmas tree and stuff. And I was thanking him and I wasn't doing a whole lot. No, this is the other piece is like, I used to feel like I had to do everything. And these days I was mostly kind of just the princess diva who was sitting around while the tree was getting put up and the lights were getting put up. And I was just kind of like, thank you. They look amazing. And he's happy and I'm happy. So it's just kind of a miracle.
Yeah. Well, I love you guys' story. I think that there's a lot of women who are trying really hard to make their relationship work. And I think they're generally, I wouldn't say all the time, but what we see quite frequently is that women are really invested in making their relationship work. And I just have to ask this, I guess this is kind of my final question. I mean, where does the guy fit into this whole story? I mean, there seems like this is really focused. Your book is focused on women. And I think the concepts you have in here is really great. But as a guy, I'm thinking, so do I just get a kick back and I hope she makes it work?
Well, what we've seen is that I know for me, when I started controlling the things that I could, which is like me, my attitude, my happiness,
Right.
My gratitude, my vulnerability. My husband had to change. He had to become different too.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like I held the key, and as soon as I started showing up in these ways that I would consider maybe more virtuous, so did my husband. Like he even says, like I had to become a better man because I was calling him to be a better man, and he wanted to be that better man to match the way I was showing up in the relationship. So I know women always say that. When do we get to the part where he changes? And I don't blame him, because that was exactly what I thought. I was like, God, he just needs to. If he would just change and everything would be fine, and I could see exactly what he needed to do differently. And, I can honestly say, I feel like he has brought everything that I ever wished for back in the day. I mean, we were at breakfast not too long ago, and we're just sitting in this little cafe. I'm looking at the people or whatever, and he goes, "Don't move." And he gets out his phone and starts taking pictures of me, right? We've been married for 26 years, and he's like acting like I'm the supermodel across the table from him. And it's just unspeakably wonderful to feel so loved every single day. But he wasn't behaving that way when I was a controlling shrew, and it's kind of understandable. But anyway, he had to start his business, or not had to, but this is his response, right? So it's like, if you want to have your husband change, wow, I can't wait to show you the keys. I can't wait to show you the influence and the power that you have for him to be a better man.
Well, I want to say thank you. And what we're talking about is first kill all the marriage counselors, not literally, but just, but no, I think, and what we're really talking about is the 6 intimacy skills. And you do such a great job unpacking each one of those in this book. And for our listeners, you can learn more at lauradoyle.org. For coaching, you have blog, more resources available. And one thing I would say just to our listeners, if you have questions, we'd love to have you ask our guests that are going to be on the show that's coming up. You just go to oxygen365.com, and there'll be information about Ask Oxygen 365, and we have a whole list of guests that are coming up. We'd love to get your questions on the air in these broadcasts. But Laura, thank you so much for being with us today, and keep up the great work. Love what you're doing, and this is a great book.
Thank you, Noel. It's really been a pleasure. So enjoyed chatting with you today. Thank you.
All right. Take care.